Hey guys, sorry about that. I'm a little tired here. We just finished up the podcast, and I figured I kind of watched the Tucker Carlson um, thing, his interview with Putin, and I thought I would be I would miss out on something if I didn't get on here and give you a take, I guess. And so I, you know, here in the Man Cave studio, follow, like, and share, do all that stuff. But this is kind of a special report. This is gonna, if you're watching this, then you're helping support us. Then you're getting some extra insight. And so I had some issues with the podcast. I had to do a little more work, and so I sat here for a little bit and started to do some editing and stuff, and I got on here. I figured, you know, let's give a little insight. Not going to be a real long video or anything, but just some extra insight and some thoughts I had. So in the podcast, it said there's three things to consider when you consider a podcast or an interview of this magnitude, or anyone that's had some kind of like major issues with civil rights, or you've had you've got a communist dictator, or something like that, is one, you wonder why you would do it. And as a Tucker Carlson type person, um I mean, this is probably the first real time I've watched Tucker Carlson. I don't watch a ton of talking heads. I listen to more of them on talk shows and stuff like that, and talk radio, um, and things of that nature. But I don't watch a ton of them, and I just never have picked up Tucker Carlson. I think he's like super animated with his laugh, and it kind of throws me off just a bit, which isn't a reason not to listen to him. But while watching and everything, it was kind of funny to me. It's just an observation. But the second one is, and I guess the answer to the first one is because he's a world leader, you know, is why you want to interview those people. Even though he's a European power, he's still a probably one of the top 4, 5, 6, maybe most powerful people in the world. And so um and that's, obviously assuming that leaders of countries are still, in power and still in charge of world things. But number two is, you what does Putin get from it, and why would he do an interview? And obviously he gets to do an interview. He gets to either propagate, or add add to the luster in the story. He gets a platform for a certain amount of time, and he gets to add his truth to the story, and to the public, and kind of get a chance to get that out. And which kind of brings you to three, is why, or do you really want to give somebody of that human rights stature, of that, you know, do you want to give that kind of person the platform? Do you want to allow them to be able to, you know, get their word out, even, you know, add more propaganda to what is already out there. Um, is that something you really want to do? And in the grand scheme of things, he made the decisions to go forward with an interview, and I think it was interesting because as much as you try to control him, he's still a dictator. He's still, as yes, he's calls himself the president, but he's not really elected every so many years. He's been in office 22 to 24 years, something like that. And with that, you know, you kind of take everything with a grain of salt. So in the questions, in the lead up to asking questions and everything, Tucker came on, and I think I I, I like his interview style because it's not it's not pushy in the fact of I'm smarter than you, or some of those guys that you see watch, or you watch, or you see that interview people, and they ask a question, or when they're talking to you, you feel, almost like they're talking down to you, and not that I think that Hannity talks down to you, or some of the guys out there, they talk down to you, but you you have a feeling that they feel like they're, one of the smartest people or the smartest person in the room. And so I like the fact that he may be a very, very smart person. Um, or he may just ask the right questions. And so he kind of, although I saw he kind of got a little impatient. Um, I think that he kept his cool and didn't interrupt so much that he was disrespectful, or that he was, I mean, humanly disrespectful. And so I think that the conversation actually kind of came out very truly and very, like, straight. And so, Putin sounded very intelligent. He sounded like he knew what he was talking about. He sounded like he he was very prepped and ready for this, and he wasn't going to sound like an idiot, which is kind of a refreshing look at at a person who's in charge. When you look at today's standards in the U.S., that is not what we always get, unfortunately. And so, uh, like I said, Tucker Carlson came out and he said that he thought at first that the beginning part of it was him kind of filibustering. And he said, but then they realized that they didn't put a time limit on him, and that it was more of him genuinely trying to rationalize the war in Ukraine, and why why there was hostilities in Ukraine. And I think some of what he said, if it's true, should make you go, and think, and especially if you have any ability to think from both sides, that you should probably, just step back, ooh, and see what. Sorry, I had a giant ant attack, so um, I think you need to step back and see what they're actually saying. And so he comments about the history, and the history he goes back to 600, and I even said this in the in the podcast, it felt like that, he said, "When did this begin?" And he says, "Oh, let's go back to the very beginning." And he talks about his birth and stuff like that, that you just went way too far back. And so basically, in about the first 3 seconds, I understood what he was trying to do. He's trying to build a case of why Ukraine really should be a part of Russia, and how the Ukrainian people aren't actually Ukrainian. It's just Ukraine. Ukraine is a term for the outer limits or the outskirts, and so the Polish people trying to create division in Russia any way they could. Um, kind of set this up to that they were, set it up that they were Ukrainian instead of really Russian, and whether the Polish people had political aspirations and they were trying to set up a buffer between Russia and Poland, or whether they just, I don't know, or whether they were trying to expand them in, because as at some point they had part of Ukraine. Um, that's this or that. And so the history lesson for about a half an hour was was what it was. It was a building of evidence. It was probably an extra long version that didn't need to be um, didn't need to be continualized, and so it it just kept on going and going and going. So history lesson being what it was a little long and drawn out, and if you cut to about the 25th minute or so, you'll get the final part of it, and you don't have to kind of listen to the whole back in 1800, 800, 600 AD and all of that, back up all the way up to 1200, and it's a little hard to follow all of the time. And even Tucker had to ask a couple questions, or and he did ask a couple times, like, how is this relevant to what what we're doing right now, or what's going on in Ukraine. So um but a couple things, that he said that the Ukrainian people, um that he Tucker asked him once he got done with that, and he said that, obviously the Ukraine was really Russian people, and that they they should be a part of Russia, blah blah blah. And just with all of the history, this and that and all that, they should be a part of Russia. They got their land from World War II, packs and stuff like that, and part of it from Poland and part of it from Turkey, and so it's really just a made up country. And until the UN decided to make them a member, which would give them access by proxy to nuclear weapons and stuff of that nature, that Russia worked great with them. They had open borders and blah blah blah. And so he really kind of states what really Ukraine has an issue with. And it's the same thing that we see kind of in Russia and other countries. It's the fact that their elections can't really be trusted. That he said that obviously the Russian president or the Ukrainian president was elected, and then they didn't, the powers that be didn't like that, and so they had a vote, and they had a second vote, and then they had a third vote, which the third vote, they don't even have like some sort of mechanism for a third vote, but they had a third vote anyways, and somehow Zelensky, won. And there was a coup. And so, I mean, you could say that. I mean, that maybe that happened. Maybe that, and he says the CIA, did this coup. And, you know, maybe. I don't know. I'm not in that. And so he said that's really where this whole thing kind of escalated, is when this coup happened, and he kept calling it a coup. And he said basically that, that if we hadn't sanctioned that coup, been no big deal. But you know, kind of can't. You still have to kind of look at everything with a grain of salt. And so he kind of pushed on through that, and was talking about that the once all that happened, the one of the other things that was interesting to me is that Tucker Carlson asked him. He goes, "So you gave a speech in like, I think it's 2019 or 2020, 2021, whatever, when it all kind of started, that the U.S. by proxy of the UN was setting up nukes in Ukraine, and were threatening nuclear war, and that is why you couldn't, that's why you couldn't allow the you couldn't you had to invade Ukraine. Couldn't allow them to become part of the UN or whatever. Is that you had to stop a nuclear attack?" And he goes, "Well, I never said that the U.S. was going to attack us with the nukes, whatever." And I can kind of remember back, and maybe I don't know, if he said exactly the U.S., but he said the Western powers, and he made it sound like he felt like we were going to attack him with nukes, and I think that's part of the showmanship of being a national leader, is that you have to speak in the way that gets your people energized, or gets your people to fall behind you. And I think that, as crazy as it sounds, we ask ourselves, why, how could you follow, a man like Hitler, or how could you follow X, Y, or Z? And the answer is because they have a certain showmanship, and they have a certain confidence to them that feels real, feels truthful. And so he spoke with with a confidence that felt truthful. And if it weren't Putin, you probably would have taken it with less of a grain of salt. And you probably would have, listened, and said, "Oh, okay," because he came up. He said, he goes, going back to the 1991, when um or I think it was 88, when the USSR fell apart. Whatever, whichever year, I don't remember right off, and I'm not going to go look it up, because it's about 12:30 now. And so you're kind of getting this whole raw replay in my head. And so he said basically when Russia fell, they took it apart on themselves, and they were assured, or they felt assured, that the Russian, or that the world would accept them as as a power, as an ally, and that they would be accepted in kind of like England or France or Italy or somebody, Spain or something. And so that they would become whatever. And they never were. And because they never were, they developed this other system of how they had to work to survive. And so, and you look at that and you go, well, if blah, when we were a budding country just starting out, or whatever, had we not been accepted by, France and whatever, and then eventually England, and that's how would we look? And I think we would look a little different than Russia, because of their communism and because of their human rights violations, and how they treat, people of different religions, which he did mention how accepting they are of all religions, and they still have a terrible record with Jehovah's Witnesses, the LGBT plus community, all of that, all of that stuff. They still have a record of jailing political opponents. You can kind of remember that there was a uprising against, you want to talk about insurrection. His top general, or the guy that's been training all his top security forces and stuff like that, turned around and was tired of being attacking Russians, and continuing on the story. And this is why you take everything with a grain of salt, because he's saying that they were attacking Russians to keep the Russian battlefront going, to keep the Russian story going, and that all of the fighting, and that was was a stage. And so, he turned around and actually started marching back towards Moscow, you know, and then somehow he ended up dying in a plane crash on the way to Belarus. Mm, but, everything was against them. So, and he talked about the weakening dollar, and how the dollar has become, was the thing, and we've used it as a political pawn, or a political piece, and we've lost the power in the dollars to that we had in the world. They've gone to get away from the dollar in oil, and so, and then the BRICS countries, that have built up and become stronger, um, by using that dollar against us, by taking on other currencies and allowing that to happen. So, you know, just some of this is true that he's saying. But he mentioned, that, in 91 he asked President Bill Clinton, about joining the UN, or joining the NATO, countries. And he said, well, maybe, could. Let me check into it a little bit, and later on, and on that same visit, um, Bill Clinton said he talked to the higher ups and he talked to his people and networking and stuff like that, and they said it probably isn't the right time. Blah blah. Kind of gave him the brush off, and so he said, okay, if no's no, no's no, and we'll plan accordingly, I guess, and whatever. And then he talked about going to Bush Senior, and saying that this um, missile defense system that they were building for NATO allies, or for allies, let's do this whole thing, and Russia will be a part of this. And they said yes, and his side say, he says they all said yes, let's do this. And then when they came back, obviously they asked a few times if he was serious, and he says, yeah, 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 definitely. And they come back and said, this is a great idea, we want to do it, but no. And so you can kind of see in those that the world would be quite a bit different place if some of this reaching across was done. And so you think, you could get a point where you think, well, the US is bad. The US is we're fighting, and if this is true, there's some thoughts backing that, maybe there are forces behind the scenes that profit from having a stronger Russian enemy than a stronger Russian ally. And to me, it's like you can say, oh, it's the Illuminati. You can say it's whatever. You could say it's there's a strong that it's the Jewish leaders. Um, there's a push as the Zionists or whatever. You can say that it's you know Russia, propagating their own propaganda, and or or being that we're Christians in the Bible, you can say it's the strong man. Maybe it's the George Soroses, and that, but what's behind those guys? Who's behind those guys? What forces for evil are really pushing this thing? And if that's the case, if there's those forces of evil, there isn't a ton we can do about it. It's we're obviously they're going to get their way here on earth because we're here on earth, and this is really not our land. This is the devil's land. And so with that, we're kind of doomed to kind of do our thing and pray and be righteous and extend out the olive branch of the gospel to everyone we can. But beyond that, you can kind of see that there, if he's telling truth, and he very well could be, there's other forces in play, and this is the evidence of it. And so that's a bit, that really is the overall kind of surprising, kind of interesting thing to me in this interview, is he does talk about the different things like that, where they offered this and then they said no, and they offered this, and if it's true, any world leader would be put off, would be upset, would be would have to find an alternate way to get their people fed, and their people prosperous and whatever. And so, that was kind of his approach. The other interesting thing that got me was, you know, he says that they're Russian Orthodox, which they proclaim to be Christian, um, by um, by way of being baptized. That whatever prince back in whatever year 800 or whatever, 1200 or whatever, as he became a Christian and they were all pagans and whatever, then he baptized his leaders, and then he was baptized by the priest, and then he baptized his leaders, and then they went out and they started baptizing the people, and it took so many years because baptizing all of the people of Russia takes time because there's a lot of people. So, but when Tucker Carlson asked him, he goes, "You profess to be a Christian, you blah blah blah." He goes, "Do you see God's hand? Do you see, you know, God's hand in any of this? Is there any movement of God?" And he said no. He said people are people and they do their thing, and so really, to me, his beliefs are almost more philosophical or more agnostic than they are really Christian beliefs. You know, because at one point he says, "Oh, Russian people are more thoughtful about their beliefs than they believe more just about they sit back and think about it and just where the Americans, they want to get profits, and they're good at using their beliefs to build themselves up and things of that nature. But if you're a person that doesn't see God in the world, doesn't see his hand moving, maybe you aren't either looking for God, or you might not be Christian, because not only do I see areas where God is moving and he is, moving his hand in the world, there are a lot of times that I see, where things could have been worse, or things could have gotten a lot, one way or another. And because of God, you know, they were used for good. And so I think that that's where he may have kind of lost his credibility. Um, so it was an interesting conversation, to say the least. And he asked at the end about the New York, I think it was New York Times reporter. And I don't have his name. I didn't keep it on the thing. So he asked about him and whether he could, he would be, they would be able to take him home or whatever. And he said no. He goes, they're working on it. He said that he accepted, secret documents. He was caught red-handed. And he says Tucker asks, who he's working for, blah blah. And he said, well, and it doesn't matter. He had secret documents, whether he's working for the U.S. government or whether he's working for, you know, CNN or whatever. He goes, I don't think he was working for Monaco because they don't care about us. So, so very tongue in cheek in that, but so he said they're working. He wants him to go back, and they want to end the war and all of that. It's just there's a lot of we want it to be peace. We want there to be a peaceful whatever, but there is also a side to him that, he doesn't want, he wants them to come to him, and he wants the pride side of things that, he doesn't want to lose his face by, declaring that he lost, or declaring that they made a treaty with the other side. So I think all in all, he didn't give anything up by doing the interview with Tucker, and I think giving him the platform, as long as you take what he said at his face value, remembering that he is a communist dictator. He has been in power for 24 years. He is getting older, and so he's trying to cement his legacy. He has terrible, maybe not as bad as Stalin or Lenin, human rights violations. He does tend to like to lock up his political opponents. It's just it's not a level playing field. It's not U.S., Russia, or not, level. It's, we can say all we want about, our human rights, or how, slavery is whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not apples to apples, or sometimes I wonder if it's even apples to oranges, if it's not more like, meatloaf to apples. So that being said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I thought it was long because it was almost it was a little over 2 hours, and just thought I'd get on here and at least give you some Christian insight, and a little more content here, a little more background on what I saw in things, and how I thought he did on the interview, how the interview went, and how if you give someone like this a platform, what it can be and what it is. So if you see this, it means you help support us, and we appreciate that. Sorry, any way that you can support us, I appreciate. If you can't support us financially, and you want to support us anyhow, 3 good ways is to give us a review, like us, share us with your friends. And we are on all kinds of different platforms. We just picked up Rumble, which has been a good platform. We go live on Twitter, or X, Facebook, YouTube. We're on Twitch. We've got so just get on, like us. We're on all of the podcasting sites on the Friday after we do these. So it comes on at 5:30 in the morning with ads. If you are one of our subscribers, you get ad free, and that goes on right after, within about an hour or two of the podcast. It is live and ready to go, so you get it a few hours early. And so, just get on, help us out, buy some t-shirts, get some merch or something, and we'll see you next time. Remember to follow, like, and share the Why I'm Angry podcast across all social media platforms and anywhere you get your podcasts. The Why I'm Angry podcast ends now.